Christmas Carol. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Stave 3. The second of the three spirits. Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But finding that he turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains this new spectre would draw back, he put them every one aside with his own hands, and lying down again established a sharp lookout all round the bed. For he wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance, and did not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Gentlemen of the free and easy sort, who plume themselves on being acquainted with a move or two, and being usually equal to the time of day, express the wide range of their capacity for adventure by observing that they are good for anything from pitch and toss to manslaughter, between which opposite extremes no doubt there lies a tolerably wide and comprehensive range of subjects. Without venturing for Scrooge quite as heartily as this, I don't mind calling on you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, and that nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light, which streamed upon it when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant or would be at, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be at that very moment an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you and I would have thought at first, for it is always the person not in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done in it, and would unquestionably have done it too. At last, I say, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. He obeyed. It was his own room, there was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked like a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there. And such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as that dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's, or for many and many a winter season gone. Heaped up on the floor, to form a kind of throne, were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, sucking pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum pudding, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense twelfth cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. "Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in, and know me better, man." Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before this spirit. He was not the dogged Scrooge he had been, and though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he did not like to meet them. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple green robe or mantle, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice.
Hell yeah, OG. That's badass.
Of the garment were also bare.
I'd be, well, the camera will be back on as soon as I get done grubbing real quick. But that's badass, OG.
Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "You have never seen the like of me before," exclaimed the spirit. "Never," Scrooge made answer to it. "I've never walked
I'm on. I just
members of
eating real quick.
Meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers born in these later years," pursued the phantom. "I don't think I have," said Scrooge. "I am afraid I have not." "Have you had many brothers, spirit?" "More than 1,800, said the ghost. "Oh, tremendous family to provide for," muttered Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas present rose. "Spirit," said Scrooge submissively, "conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it." "Touch my robe." Scrooge did as he was told, and held it fast.
Ultra high, hell yeah.
Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, geese, game, poultry, broad meat, pigs, sausages, oysters, pies, puddings, fruit, and punch all vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night. And they stood in the city street.
Hell yeah, see you tomorrow, OG.
Where, for the weather was severe, the people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music in scraping the snow from the pavements in front of their dwellings and from the tops of their houses, whence it was mad delight to the boys to see it come plumping down into the road below, splitting into artificial little snowstorms. The house looked black enough, and the windows flatter, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs, and with the dirtier snow upon the ground, which last deposit had been plowed up in deep furrows by the heavy wheels of carts and wagons, furrows that crossed and recrossed each other hundreds of times, where the great streets branched off and made intricate channels, hard to trace in the thick yellow and icy water. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had, by one consent, caught fire and were blazing away with their dear heart's content. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad that the clearest summer air and the brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. For the people who were shoveling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another from the parapets, and now and then exchanging a facetious snow snowball. Better-natured missile far than many a wordy jest, laughing heartily if it went right, and not less heartily if it went wrong. The poulterers' shop was still half open, and the fruiterers were radiant in their glory. There were great, round, pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts, shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at the doors and tumbling out into the street in their apoplectic opulence. There were ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions, shining in the fatness of their growth and Spanish flowers. Their shelves in wanton slyness at the girls as they went by and glanced demurely at the hung-up mistletoe. There were pears and apples,
right back,
high and blooming pyramids. There were bunches of grapes, made in the shopkeeper's benevolence to dangle from conspicuous hooks that people's mouths might water gratis as they passed. There were piles of filberts, mossy and brown, recalling in their fragrance ancient walks among the woods and pleasant shufflings ankle-deep through withered leaves. There were Norfolk biffins, squat and swarthy, setting off the yellow of the oranges and lemons, and in the great compactness of their juicy persons, urgently entreating and beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. The very gold and silver fish set forth among these choice fruits in a bowl, though members of a dull and stagnant-blooded race, appeared to know that there was something going on, and to a fish went gasping round and round their little world in slow and passionless excitement. The grocers. Oh, the grocers. Nearly closed, with perhaps 2 shutters down, or 1, but through these gaps such glimpses. It was not alone that the scales descending on the counter made a merry sound, or that the twine and roller parted company so briskly, or that the canisters were rattled up and down like juggling tricks, or even that the blended scents of tea and coffee were so grateful to the nose, or even that the raisins were so plentiful and rare, and so extremely white, the sticks of cinnamon so long and straight, the other spices so delicious, the candied fruits so caked and spotted with molten sugar as to make the coldest lookers-on feel faint and subsequently bilious. Nor was it that the figs were moist and pulpy, or that the French plums blushed in modest hardness from their highly decorated boxes, or that everything was good to eat and in its Christmas dress. But the customers were all so hurried and so eager in their hopeful promise of the day that they tumbled up against each other at the door, crashing their wicker baskets wildly, and left their purchases upon the counter, and came running back to fetch them, and committed hundreds of like mistakes in the best humor possible, while the grocer and his people were so frank and fresh that the polished hearts with which they fastened their aprons behind might have been their own, one outside for general inspection, and for Christmas doors to peck at if they chose. But soon the steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces, and at the same time there emerged from scores of by-streets, lanes, and nameless turnings innumerable people carrying their dinners to the baker's shops. The sight of these poor revelers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in a baker's doorway, and taking off the covers as their bearers passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. And it was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly. For they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day. And so it was. God love it, so it was. In time the bells ceased, and the bakers were shut up. And yet there was a genial shadowing forth of all these dinners and the progress of their cooking in the thawed blotch of wet above each baker's oven. for the pavement smoked as if its stones were cooking too. Is there a peculiar flavor in what you sprinkle from your torch? Asked Scrooge. There is. My own. Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day? Asked Scrooge. To any kindly given, to a poor one most. Why to a poor one most? Asked Scrooge. Because it needs it most. Spirit, said Scrooge after a moment's thought. I wonder you, of all the beings in the many worlds about us, should desire to cramp these people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment. Aye, cried the Spirit. You would deprive them of their means of dining every seventh day, often the only day on which they can be said to dine at all, said Scrooge. Wouldn't you? Aye, cried the Spirit. You seek to close these places on the seventh day, said Scrooge. And it comes to the same thing. I see, exclaimed the Spirit. Forgive me if I am wrong. It has been done in your name, or at least in that of your family, said Scrooge. There are some upon this earth of yours, returned the Spirit, who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness, who are
hey D-Man, how you doing?
And all our kith and kin as if they had never lived.
Well, it wasn't too bad.
Remember that, and charge their doings on
You got me,
not us.
Actually, let me go show you. I got it in there real quick. I got me a nice little light pad.
Into the suburbs of the town. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost, which Scrooge had observed at the baker's, that notwithstanding his gigantic size, he could accommodate himself to any place with ease, and that he stood beneath a low roof quite as gracefully and like a supernatural creature as it was possible he could have done in any lofty hall. And perhaps it was the pleasure the good Spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous-hearted nature and his sympathy with all poor men that led him straight to Scrooge's clerk.
There I got that for Christmas.
Holding to his robe. And on the threshold of the door, the Spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinkling of his torch. Think of that. Bob had 15 bob a week himself. He pocketed on Saturdays but 15 copies of his Christian name. And yet, the ghost of Christmas present blessed his full-roomed house. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, Cratchit's wife.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm doing, too. I just barely got a paintbrush. That way I can seal this one.
And she laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave and rivetous, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes.
Sell it and get a frame for it.
Bob's private property conferred upon his son.
Look at the size of these ones.
Into his mouth, rejoiced to find himself so gallantly attired, and yearned to show his linen in the fashionable parks. And now, two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose. And
that's what these two are.
In luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, these young Cratchits danced about the table and exalted Master Peter Cratchit to the skies. He, not proud, although his collars nearly choked him, blew the fire until the slow potatoes, bubbling up, knocked loudly at the saucepan lid to be let out and peeled.
Actually, what works real good. I don't break shit. Give me 1 second.
And Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour. Here's Martha, Mother.
What I use for that Freddy and Jason one that I did. What I use is
Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are, said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times and taking off her shawl and bonnet for her with officious zeal. We'd a deal of work to finish.
I put some on and just brush it real good. Brush it in there. Put like one real good coat, and then maybe another one if you need it, and it seals it and protects it. They have different colored ones of this, but the ones I use is this one.
Hide, Martha, hide. So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob, the father, with at least 3 feet of comforter, exclusive of the fringe, hanging down the floor, and his threadbare clothes.
Walmart, or if you have a Hobby Lobby, Hobby Lobby will have it, but I got mine at Walmart. Cause you could buy just a small one like this, or you could buy a bigger one. And don't be fooled by it, because it doesn't come out exactly clear when you put it on, but when it dries, it does, as you can see.
For he had been Tim's blood horse all the way from church, and had come home rampant. Not coming upon Christmas Day. Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, if it were only in joke. So she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into his arms, while the 2 young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off into the wash house, that he might hear the pudding singing.
Oh, no problem. I like it because even though, you know how they give well, not that they give it to you when you buy a kit, but you can order as an accessory the little roller.
Somehow he gets thoughtful.
That, because that's real good to use afterwards, just to press him down and whatnot.
He told me coming home that he hopes the people saw him in the because he was a Christian.
For the small one,
it might be pleasant to them to remember.
It was under $10, I think.
Who made the lame beggars walk and blind men see?
They have bigger ones for like 20 or more, but the small one like that was under 10. But I found that, yeah, I like it because, like I said, it seals it and makes sure that everything sticks and pretty much protects it. And then I need to get a frame, and then it'll be ready.
Poor fellow, they were capable of being made more shabby. Compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and round, and put it on the.
That's usually in the hobby crafts part of Walmart.
With which they soon returned in high possession. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon, to which a black swan was a matter of course. And in truth, it was something very like it in that house. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy, ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The 2 young Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their posts, crammed spoons.
But it'll seal it, and it'll keep the gloss that it already naturally has.
At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all round the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the 2 young Cratchits,
but for this one, I'm definitely gonna have to use a different setup,
there was never
because. Well, let's see. Since you're here, let's take this out real quick.
And flavor, size, and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight, surveying one small cannon bone upon the dish, they had made it all at last. Yet everyone had had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witnesses, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning off. Suppose somebody should have got over the wall of the backyard and stolen it while they were merry with the goose, a supposition at which the two young Cratchits remained living. All sorts of horrors were supposed. Hullo, a great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the cupboard. A smell like a washing day. That was cloth. A smell like an eating house and a pastry cook next door to each other, with a laundress next door to that. That was the pudding. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding like a speckled cannonball, so hard and burning. I
usually order them. There's something I think would be cool. I'll do. That was this one. Let's take a look at the other one.
Bob Cratchit said, calmly too, that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now that they brought to mind, she would confess that she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been flat heresy to do so. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. At last the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect, apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a shovelful of chestnuts on the fire. Then all the Cratchit family drew round the hearth in what Bob Cratchit called a circle, meaning half.
Pretty good sized one there.
At Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass, 2 tumblers, and a custard cup without a handle. These held the hot stuff from the jug, however, as well as golden goblets would have done, and Bob served it out with beaming looks, while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and cracked noisily. Then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us," which all the family re-echoed. "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim, the last of all. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him.
Hey, at least you got someone to send you some that you don't have to get or buy. At least I don't think you have to buy them. I'm not trying to assume nothing.
"See a vacant seat," replied the ghost, "in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved.
Because once you start getting into those sizes, yeah, the price kind of goes up."
"No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind spirit. Say he will be."
Yeah, but my when I
shadows remain unaltered by the future. Another of my
seal this and frame it.
Will find him here.
I might have to try to see if I can find a buyer for it.
Decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief. "Man," said the ghost, "if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, and who shall die?
Yeah, but I can't tell. I go through when I'm looking for them. At least for once to do, I go through.
Oh,
just looking through like different ones, like hundreds and hundreds of different ones before I find one that catches my eye. Something I think looks cool.
Bent before the ghost's rebuke, and trembling cast his eyes upon the ground. But he raised them.
That I'm not sure.
Mr. Scrooge, said Bob. I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
Because that one,
feast indeed, cried Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. I wish I had him here.
I didn't work on it like I probably should have. But it took me a little bit more than a week to do.
Christmas Day. It should be a Christmas
and that's the thing, I'm not
Day,
sure
said she.
how to price ones like that.
The health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow. My dear, was Bob's mild answer, Christmas Day. I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's, said Mrs. Cratchit, not for his. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care tuppence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for full 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, from the mere relief of Scrooge the baleful being done with. Bob Cratchit told them how he had a situation in his eye for Master Peter, which would bring in, if obtained, full 5 and 6pence weekly. The two young Cratchits laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter's being a man of business, and Peter himself looked thoughtfully at the fire from between his collars, as if he were deliberating what particular investments he should favor when he came into the receipt of that bewildering income. Martha, who was a poor apprentice at a milliner's, then told them what kind of work she had to do, and how many hours she worked at a stretch, and how she meant to lie abed tomorrow morning for a good long rest. Tomorrow being a holiday, she passed at home. Also, how she had seen a countess and a lord some days before, and how the lord was much about as tall as Peter, at which Peter pulled up his collar so high that you couldn't have seen his head if you had been there. All this time the chestnuts and the jug went round and round, and by they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice, and sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from waterproof. Their clothes were scanty. And Peter might have known, or very likely did, the inside of a pawnbroker's. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, and looked happier yet in the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. By this time it was getting dark, and snowing pretty heavily, and as Scrooge and the spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Here the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner, with hot plates baking through and through before the fire, and deep red curtains, ready to be drawn to shut out cold and darkness. There all the children of the house were running out into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and be the first to greet them. Here again were shadows on the window blind of guests assembling, and there a group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur-booted and all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near neighbor's house, where, woe upon the single man who saw them enter. Artful witches, well they knew it, in a glow. But if you had
the one I'm listening to right now is
you might have thought that no one was at home to give them welcome.
App that's
of every house expecting company and piling up its fires.
At least these audiobooks are under public domain, so I can actually play them and not get in trouble.
And floated on. Outpouring
so I see what I can get it good.
Its bright and harmless mirth on everything within its reach.
But it's
who ran on before
LibriVox.
The dusky street with specks of light, and who was dressed to spend the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirit passed. Though little Ken,
so you can see
he had any company.
The little ad.
And now,
but I also like the books I usually play are from my Audible account. So I have an Audible account for other audiobooks.
Or would have done so, but for the frost that held it prisoner. And nothing grew but moss and furs.
But the LibriVox has
down in the west, the setting sun left a streak of
all kinds of old ones like H.G. Wells, Charles Dickens, like what we're listening to, Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe. So it has a lot of older ones like Musketeers,
a place where miners live.
Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan,
returned the spirit.
H.G. Wells, like The Invisible Man, The War of Worlds,
from the window of a hut.
And like what we're listening to tonight, which I thought, since it's Christmas, it'd be fitting, so I decided to play a Christmas carol, like Ebenezer Scrooge,
with their children and their children's children, and another generation beyond that, all decked out.
But I've had my my Audible account for a couple of years now. And I have like on my Audible account, I purchased or should I say have over 100 books.
The old man got quite blithe and loud, and so
but this is a different app, that LibriVox, which you can find all kinds of old ones like Homer, the Odyssey, the Iliad.
Not to see, to see. To Scrooge's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks behind them, and his ears were deafened by the thundering of water, as it rolled and roared and raged among the dreadful caverns it had worn, and fiercely tried to undermine the earth. Built upon a dismal reef of sunken rocks, some league or so from shore, on which the waters chafed and dashed the wild year through, there stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seaweed clung to its base, and storm birds, born of the wind, one might suppose, as seaweed of the water, rose and fell about it like the waves they skimmed.
But I do this at night anyways to get ready for bed. Listen to a book, smoke till I get tired, and lay down. Hey, Sports Talk, how you doing? Hope you're doing well.
They wished each other Merry Christmas in their can of grog. And one of them, the elder too, with his face all damaged and scarred with hard weather, as the figurehead of an old ship might be, struck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself. Again the ghost sped on, above the black and heaving sea, on, until, being far away, as he told Scrooge, from any shore, they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, the lookout in the bow, the officers who had the watch. Dark, ghostly figures in their several stations, but every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day, with homeward hopes belonging to it. And every man on board waking or sleeping, good or bad, had had a kinder word for another on that day than on any day in the year, and had shared to some extent in its festivities, and had remembered those he cared for at a distance.
No, probably not. Probably stay inside, away from people.
It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of
less
the wind,
chance of any trouble happening.
What a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, whose depths were secrets as profound as death. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with a spirit standing smiling by his side, and looking at that same nephew with approving affability.
What are you planning on doing, Sports Talk?
If you should happen by any unlikely chance to know a man more blessed in a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me, and I'll cultivate his acquaintance. It is a fair, even-handed, noble adjustment of things, that while there is infection and disease,
me not so much, but then again, I don't like being around people to begin with. So
when Scrooge's nephew laughed in his way, holding his side,
especially on New Year's, there'd be a lot of people then.
His face into the most extravagant contortions, Scrooge's niece, by marriage, laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends, being on a bit behindhand, roared out lustily. He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live, cried Scrooge's nephew. He believed it, too. More shame for him, Fred, said Scrooge's niece indignantly. Bless those women, they never do anything by hands. They are always in earnest. She was very pretty, exceedingly pretty, with a dimpled, surprised-looking capital face, a ripe little mouth that seemed made to be...
Hell yeah, scratching with D-Man.
All kinds of good little dots about her chin that melted into...
I mean, I've just never been too much of a people person.
Pair of eyes you ever saw in any little creature's head. Altogether, she was what you would have called provoking,
cool.
You know, but satisfactory, too. Oh, perfectly.
That and I've had too much stuff happen in the past. I don't like crowds or people.
Not so pleasant as he might.
It affects my
However,
my PTSD.
Carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against them. I'm sure he's very rich, Fred, hinted Scrooge's niece. At least you always tell me so. What of that, my dear? Said Scrooge's nephew. His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He has the satisfaction of thinking that he is ever going to benefit us with it. I have no patience with him, observed Scrooge's niece. Scrooge's niece's sisters, and all the other ladies, expressed the same opinion. Oh, I have, said Scrooge's
I don't know.
nephew. I am sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence?
It's not my DJs and all that's just not my scene.
I think he loses a very good dinner, interrupted Scrooge's niece. Everybody else said the same, and they must be allowed to have been competent judges, because they had just had dinner, and with the dessert upon the table were clustered round the fire by lamplight. Well, I'm very glad to hear it, said Scrooge's nephew, because I haven't great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper? Topper had clearly got his eye upon one of Scrooge's...
I had some homemade
was a wretched outcast.
red chile sal with some tortillas.
Whereat Scrooge's niece's sister, the plump one,
is what I had for dinner.
Not the one with the roses.
Sal, tortillas.
Do go on, Fred, said Scrooge's niece, clapping her hands. "He never finishes what he begins to say. He is such a ridiculous fellow." Scrooge's nephew revelled in another laugh, and as it was impossible to keep the infection off, though the plump sister tried hard to do it with aromatic vinegar, his example was unanimously followed. "I was only going to say," said Scrooge's nephew,
it was a sal with tortillas, so much red chili and meat or beef.
Which could do him no harm. I am sure he loses.
And it was homemade red chili.
He can find in his own thoughts.
To pretty much chili pots that got boiled, blended, then cooked.
To give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not. For I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there in good temper,
well, that's what asado is. It's red chili and meat.
If it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk 50 pounds, that's something. And I think I shook him yesterday. It was their turn to laugh now at the notion of his
asado, and
but being thoroughly good-natured and not much caring what they laughed at, so that they laughed at any rate. He encouraged them in
traditionally it's made with red chili and pork.
After tea, they had some music. They were a very musical family, and knew what
it was spicy.
When they sang a glee,
not too spicy for me, but it might have been spicy for other people.
Good one, and never swell the large veins in his forehead or get red in the face over it.
Because we have a big old bag that we get that they sell around here of the dried red chilies, and what you do with that, you just break the end off of it or the stem, dump out the seeds, at least most of the seeds.
When this strain of music
throw them in
all the things that ghost had shown him on his mind.
A pot to add some water and boil it.
And thought that if he could have listened to it often,
until it gets nice and tender or soft, and then take that, put it in a blender with some garlic, a little bit of that water, and blend it up. My spice tolerance, I have pretty good spice tolerance.
When its mighty founder was a child himself. Stop. There was first a game at Blind Man's Bluff.
I've had,
of course there was.
Well, I still have it's Carolina Reaper hot sauce.
My opinion is that it was a done thing.
I also have a scorpion pepper Tabasco sauce.
Christmas present knew it. The way he went after that plump sister.
So I guess my spice tolerance is pretty, at least somewhat high.
Knocking down the fire irons, tumbling over the chairs, bumping against the piano, smothering himself among the curtains. Wherever she went, there went he. He always knew where the plump sister was. He wouldn't catch anybody else. If you had fallen up against him, as some of them did, on purpose, he would have made a feint of endeavoring to seize you, which would have been an affront to your understanding, and would instantly have sidled off in the direction of the plump sister. She often cried out that it wasn't fair, and it really was not. But when at last he caught her, when, in spite of all her silken rustlings and her rapid flutterings past him, he got her into a corner whence there was no escape, then his conduct was the most execrable.
That's not really saying much, because pretty much anything spicy is going to make your mouth burn.
Touch her headdress, and further to assure himself of her identity by pressing a certain ring upon her finger and a certain chain about her neck.
I've tried the mango habanero wings. No, they're pretty good.
When another blind man being in office, they were so
and they're not, at least to me, they're not very spicy. They have some spice to it. It's more of a sweet spice.
snug.
Because they'll start off sweet, then progressively get hotter, but
she joined in the forfeits and loved her
they're not.
love to admiration.
They're not too spicy. They're
Likewise,
I'd say they're about
she was very
a
good.
medium or a mild
Joy of Scrooge's nephew,
as far as like spice, at least to me.
though they were sharp girls too, as Topper could have told you. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting, in the interest he had in what was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears, he sometimes came out with his guess quite loud, and very often guessed quite right too.
I actually used to have a hot sauce that was a mango habanero hot sauce.
Blunt as he took it in his head to be.
But I think the spiciest, as far as like hot sauces that I've had, was probably the Carolina Reaper hot sauce. Because I've had a Carolina Reaper hot sauce and a ghost pepper hot sauce. And I have to say the hotter the two, at least to me, would probably have been the Carolina Reaper. Oh yeah, most definitely try Carolina Reaper chicken.
The brisk fire of questioning to which he was exposed.
Me and my brother at one of the, I guess,
a savage animal,
meat packing places that we have here, or meat stores, like a butcher shop and whatnot. They have a Carolina Reaper cheese. It's like the white cheese, like a pepper jack, but it's Carolina Reaper cheese. Now that one had a pretty good, nice little kick to it.
At every fresh question that was put to him,
no, but I most definitely try some wings like that.
Roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled that he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stand. At last, the plump sister, falling into a similar state, cried out, "Ah, I have found it! I know what it is, Fred! I know what it is!" "What is it?" cried Fred. "It's your Uncle Scrooge!" Which it certainly was. Admiration was the universal sentiment, though some objected that the reply to, "Is it a bear?"
Oh yeah.
ought to have been, yes.
I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and I don't want to butcher it, but I've heard about that.
Diverted their thoughts from Mr. Scrooge, supposing they had ever had any tendency that way. "He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure," said Fred.
Because there's the
ungrateful not to drink his.
There's the Scotch bonnets
Here's
too.
a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, "Uncle Scrooge." Well, Uncle Scrooge.
But I've heard that ghost pepper's referred to as that name.
"A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is," said Scrooge's nephew. "He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge." Uncle Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return, and thanked them in an inaudible speech, if Ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words of his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick men, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close at home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greatest hope. By poverty, and it was rich.
Well, you got that terribly wrong, but
in misery's every refuge, where vain man and his little brief authority had not made fast the door and brought the spirit out, they left his blessing and taught Scrooge his
hopefully I didn't butcher it. I said it right nice.
If it were only a night.
I was hoping I didn't butcher it.
Appeared to be condensed into the space of time they passed together. It was strange not altered in his outward form, the ghost grew older.
That's one type of cuisine I've always wanted to try. It was Indian food.
When looking at the spirit as they
Nice.
stood together in an open place, he noticed that his hair was gray. Are spirits' lives so short? Asked Scrooge. My life
This being a small town, there's really nowhere, at least that style of
Tonight, cried Scrooge.
restaurants around here.
Tonight at midnight. Hark, the time is drawing near. The chimes were ringing the 11:03.
I'm a fat guy. I like food. What can I say? I've always been curious to try other types of cuisines. Yeah. Indian is actually on one of my list of food to try.
It might be a claw for the flesh there is upon it.
Nice. I probably would like it. Cause I definitely like spice. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
It brought 2 children. Wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at his feet and clung upon the outside of his garment. Oh, man, look here. Look, down here, exclaimed the ghost. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate, too, in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints, a stale and shriveled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacing. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade through all the mysteries of wonderful creation, as monsters half so horrible and dread. Scrooge started back, appalled. Having them shown to him in this way, he tried to say they were fine children, but the words choked themselves rather than be parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude.
Indian and Thai.
Spirit, are they yours? Scrooge considered.
I've had a little bit of Thai food from some restaurants, but I don't know if you'd actually call it authentic Thai food, but
They gleam to me, appealing from their fathers.
them are two, definitely two that I wouldn't mind trying, like actually authentic, like food from there, not just like, I guess, what do you call it, the Americanized versions of it, actually authentic, not something that's not.
Deny it, cried the
Hell
Spirit,
yeah.
stretching out his hand towards the city. Slander those who tell it you. Admit it for your fascist purposes and make it worse, and bide the end. Have you no refuge or resource? Cried Scrooge. Are there no prisons? Said the Spirit.
Nice.
On him for the last time with his
On
own
some of the
words. Are there no
travel
houses?
shows I've watched, like travel and cooking and
Struck.
foodie stuff, because
Scrooge looked about
I'm a
him
fat
for
kid.
the ghost and saw it not.
but I remember doing some of that butter chicken in one of the places they were at, and
Jacob Marley.
if I remember right, the butter chicken they had was actually cooked inside of like a clay pot.
Like a mist along the ground towards it. End of stave.
Oh yeah, I like traveling. What can I say? I used to travel, hitchhiking and hopping trains, and I still like it, seeing different places.
Stave 4 of A Christmas Carol.
And I guess watching them
This
shows
recording is in the public domain. Read by
makes
Bob
me,
Neufeld.
I guess,
A
calms
Christmas Carol by
my
Charles
itchy
Dickens.
feet from wanting to roam.
Stave 4. The Last of the Spirits. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee.
That sounds pretty good. Sports talk.
To scatter gloom and mystery.
I wish there was places around here that
shrouded in a deep black garment, which
had a variety of food.
Its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand.
Because it being a small town,
it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the
we don't really have all that much.
He felt that it was tall
although
and
for
stately when it came beside him.
For a little while, we did have
with a solemn dread.
A truck come in.
For the spirit neither spoke nor moved. I am in the presence of
we had a food truck that come in. Well, they're already here, but they got all their food stuff and ingredients from Louisiana.
You are about to show me shadows.
It was actually the first time I had some fried gator tail.
Scrooge pursued.
That truck had pretty much anything, any type of
the garment was contracted for an instant
Cajun food or tuna food that you could think of. Like all the stuff that you would find in New Orleans. So you had your gator, you had your crawfish, you had your jambalaya, you had your gumbo.
His legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it.
We eat a lot of fried chicken.
Yeah,
Cajun food. I like Cajun food, especially for the spices.
Was all the worse for this. It thrilled
I'll eat some fried chicken, especially if it's done good.
Behind that dusky shroud, there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a
coffee etiquette, where you break the head off and take all the juices from the head.
Of the future, he exclaimed.
I like.
You are more than any
I'll probably get some hate for some people from Louisiana, but as far as like gumbo and jambalaya, they're both really good. I ain't got no complaints with either one. But I like jambalaya more than I do gumbo.
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed.
I still tear up either one, but
lead on,
my preference is more towards jambalaya.
The night is waiting fast.
I think mainly because
time to me, I know.
The rice.
Lead on, spirit. The phantom moved
from
as it had come towards him.
Chipotle. I don't know. I never had one. We don't have one. We don't have a store, Chipotle store here.
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them as its own act. And there they were in the heart of it, on change amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the blood
from New Mexico, but I'm from. I'm in New Mexico, but I'm in Carlsbad, which is
Scrooge had seen them.
Pretty small town.
The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen.
And the most famous thing, most thing that we're known for is
advanced to listen to
the Carlsbad Caverns.
No, said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead. When did he die? Inquired another. Last night, I believe. Why? What was the matter with him?
Yeah, in Carlsbad.
Taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff box. I thought he'd never die. God knows, said the first, with a yawn. What has he done with his money? Asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey cock. I haven't heard, said the man with the large chin, yawning again. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know. The pleasantry was received with a general laugh. It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, said the same speaker. For upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer? I don't mind going, if A lunch is provided, observed the gentleman with the excrescence on his nose. But I must be fed if I make one. Another laugh. Well, I am the most disinterested among you after all, said the first speaker, for I never wear black gloves, and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend. For we used to stop and
I don't think so.
whenever we met.
I think you're wrong on that, bro.
Speakers and listeners.
Remember, it's Carlsbad, New Mexico, not Carlsbad, California.
Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided on into a street. His finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie here.
But there ain't none here.
These men also, perfect.
That I can guarantee.
Very wealthy and of great importance. He had made a point always of standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view. How are you? Said one. How are you? Returned the other. Well, said the first, Old Scratch has got his own at last.
We would have known about one of those.
Returned the second. Cold, isn't it? Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose. Oh, no. Something else to think of. Good morning. Not another word.
Because me and my brothers always looks out for new places to eat.
Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance
We had
conversations apparently so
a Carl's Jr. for a while, but
that they must have some
that ended up shutting down because they couldn't get no one to work there or to stay working there.
They would scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost's province was the future. Nor could he think of anyone immediately connected with himself to whom he could apply them. But nothing doubting that to whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral for his own improvement, he resolved to treasure up every word he heard and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of
there's two Taco Bell ones, but
for he had an expectation that the conduct of his future
Taco Bell's not the same as some of the other places,
and would render the solution of these riddles easy. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the
I wish we could get some good fast food or good restaurants around here to actually stay.
Revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his newborn resolutions carried out.
Because the only type of Asian type restaurant we have here
beside him stood the phantom
is
with his outstretched hand.
all you can eat Chinese buffet, and there's another one. I guess it's a little bit better than the buffet, but
that the unseen eyes
it's one called Tokyo Grill.
It made him shudder and feel very old. They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of the town, where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly.
Yep.
Alleys and archways.
One on one part of town and one on the other part of town.
And dirt and life upon the straggling streets. The whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed.
That's how they have
below a penthouse roof.
A lot of the stores that we have two of,
bottles, bones, and greasy
like McDonald's,
were brought.
Subway,
upon the floor within,
Domino's,
heaps of
everyone on one part of town, and there'll be another location on the other part of town.
Scales, weights, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize.
Yeah, both those locations are in where I'm at, but
of corrupted fat and sepulchres of bones. Sitting in among the wares,
talked about
by a charcoal
quality
stove,
has definitely gone down
bricks,
in the years.
a gray-haired
It's not like it
rascal,
used to
nearly
be.
70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frowsy curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung upon a line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh. "Let the charwoman alone to be the first," cried she who had entered first. "Let the laundress alone to be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without meaning it." "You couldn't have met in a better place," said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. "Come into the parlor. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two ain't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. Ah, how it squeaks. There ain't such a rusty bit of metal in the place as its own hinges, I believe. And I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. We're all suitable to our calling. We're well matched. Come into the parlor. Come into the parlor." The parlor was the space between the screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together with an old stair rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp, for it was night, with
the other one is actually
put it in his mouth again.
Half of it's McDonald's and the other half is part of the gas station.
Threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking with a bold defiance.
I guess you could say that we're oil field town.
What odds, Mrs. Dilber?
We got a lot of people coming in from all over the state, all over the country to stay here and then go work in the oil fields.
And more so. Why then, don't stand staring as if
so yeah, we're a small town, but
we're not gonna pick
big city prices for everything.
I suppose. No, indeed.
And it's all because we're oil field town.
We should hope not. Very well then, cried the woman. That's
a lot of
who's the worse for the loss of a
oil field workers to come through.
Not a dead man, I suppose. No, indeed, said Mrs. Dilber. If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw, pursued the woman, why, wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there, alone, by himself. It's the truest word that ever was spoken, said Mrs. Dilber. It's a judgment on him. Why, I wish it was a little heavier judgment, replied the woman. And it should have been, you may depend on it, if I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We know pretty well that we were helping ourselves before we met here. I believe it's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe. But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced...
Yeah, we have one Chili's.
It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall, and added them up into a total when he found there was nothing more to come. That's your account, said Joe, and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next? Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself, said old Joe. That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it an open question, I'd repent of being so liberal.
Oh yeah, we definitely have a lot of dispensaries.
And now, undo my Joe.
New Mexico was
Joe went
medical.
on his knees for the greater convenience.
You can have your cannabis and wax and whatnot if you had a medical card. And then there is still some, but not that many. But once it became recreational.
Bed curtains. You don't mean to say you took them down?
Dispensaries popped up all over the place,
said Joe. Yes, I do, replied.
Yeah, but we definitely
Why not?
Excuse me.
You were born to make
I think we're about even with the.
And you'll certainly do it.
How many dispensaries we have versus
by reaching out for the sake of
how many food places we have in town.
I promise you, Joe, returned the woman coolly. Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now. His blankets? Asked Joe. Who else's do you think? Replied the woman. He isn't likely to take cold without them, I dare say. I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh? Said old Joe, stopping in his work and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that, returned the woman. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such doings if he did. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache. Find a hole. And a fine one. I'd wasted it if it hadn't been for me. Asked old Joe. Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure, replied the woman with a laugh. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one. Scrooge listened to this in horror. As they sat grouped about their spoil in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lamp, he viewed them
we got a Wingstop
and disgust which could hardly have been greater, though they had been obscene.
We got a Wingstop, we got a McAllister's Deli.
Laughed the same woman when old Joe, producing a flannel bag with money in it, told out their several gains upon the ground. This is the end of it.
But we got a Buffalo Wild Wings too. But Wingstop is fairly new, but it's actually pretty good compared to some of the other places in town.
I see. The case of this unhappy man.
Oh, is it?
My life tends that way now.
I remember when it first got here.
He recoiled in
me and my
but the scene had changed.
Brother were going to go get something to eat. We went in there. We're about to place our order. Hey, Death Squad, how you doing, bro?
Which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy.
But yeah, they told us we're going to go make an order. They told us it could be at least there would be like a 2 to 3 hour wait. We said, we pretty much said, fuck that, we're out. But it was a grand opening, and it being a small town the way it is.
Glanced towards the Phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head.
Hell yeah, that's what. It being a small town like it is.
The
any new food place that comes into town, if you want to eat there, either be first in line or give it a week or so, and you won't have such a long wait.
Oh, cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death.
No, about the same, just chilling, smoking, listening to a book.
For this is thy dominion. But of the loved, revered, and honored head, thou canst not turn one hair to thy dread purposes, and make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open, generous, and the heart brave, warm, and tender, and the pulse a man's. Strike, Shadow, strike, and see his good deeds springing from the wound to sow the world with life immortal. No voice pronounced these words in Scrooge's ears, and yet he heard them when he looked upon the bed.
Sometimes it's the wings and fries, or it's usually
what would be his
the chicken sandwich and fries. So the chicken sandwiches are pretty healthy too. They're a good size, and
he lay in the dark, empty house.
The fries are pretty good there. We've had the regular ones, and we had those.
And for the
I tell you, was it the voodoo fries?
I will be kind to him. My cat was tearing at the door, and there was.
But even for a small order of fries, it's a healthy amount of fries.
And why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not dare to think. Spirit, he said, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. The orange and all that's done. That's all we are going to be able to get done because we needed
Scrooge returned,
more colors.
If I could.
But
I have not the power, Spirit. I have
that session's done. I think that's the second session.
Seemed to look upon him. If there is any person in the town,
second or third session, I'm not sure.
By this man's death, said Scrooge, quite agonized. Show that person to me, Spirit.
The mango habanero, that or
the
Cajun.
Before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight, where a mother and her children were. She was expecting something.
But yeah, we got that little bit done.
For she walked
the first hour wasn't that bad, but after that first hour, I started feeling that on the leg. But we got at least that color down. But we didn't have the other colors yet. And
at length, the
most hated
was heard. She hurried to
just the other day ordered
a man whose face
a set of
worn and depressed.
A set of colors that we could use to finish it up.
A kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed and which he struggled.
How many what? Calories?
He sat down to the dinner that had been hoarding for him by the fire. And when she asked him...
Dude, I have no idea.
Which was not until after a long silence.
I usually don't check for stuff like that because...
Is it good?
I don't really...
Or bad to help him?
Doesn't bother me how much calories it has in it.
He answered. We are quite ruined? No.
Dude, I have no idea.
She said.
I don't count calories.
Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened. He is past relenting, said her husband. He is dead. She was a mild and patient.
Oh, I definitely can't wait to get it done.
Truth, but she was thankful.
But yeah, when I picked
she said so with
my thigh for that piece, that particular piece.
First was the emotion of her.
I thought I was getting off easy.
What the half-drunken woman who I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill,
But once that's done, yeah, there's still a couple that my brother's got to finish it. We have going. Cause I got that one that was on my thigh, and I got one that's on my shoulder. But,
we may sleep tonight with light hearts.
dude, I have no idea sports talk.
Soften it as they would, their hearts were
Like
light.
the one on my shoulders,
Children's faces,
like a big old thick chaos star.
Were brighter, and it was a happier house.
And then the other one he's got to finish is my ribs.
That the ghost would show
And
him caused by
I'm saving that for the last one just because
Let me see
ribs
some
suck.
tenderness connected with
That shit hurts.
said Scrooge.
And with the upper thigh,
Spirits which we now will be forever present.
definitely a shitty spot.
The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. And he took
Yeah,
the
but
child
near
and
the
set
end
in
of
the
it,
midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard these words?
it was definitely hurting, but
The boy must have read them out
my
as he
back
was
was
stood
hurting
across
too,
the
cause
threshold.
right where my lower back is was right where
Laid her work upon the table.
the center of the table to where it folds in half. So,
The color
and it's an
touched
older
my
table,
eyes.
so all that cushion is like
The color,
not as cushion as it used to be.
poor Tiny Tim.
So
They're better now. Again,
it's a little tender.
Cratchit's wife. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world.
So like laying like for a long period of time on that, but after a while, all I was able to feel was
I think he has
those
lost a
two
little
pieces of
stomach
wood,
that he used. He's
like,
too
all
happy.
along my lower back.
They were very quiet again. At last she said, and in a steady, cheerful voice that only faltered once, I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed. And so have I, cried Peter, often. And so have I, exclaimed another. So had all. But he was very light to carry, she resumed, intent upon her work, and his father loved him, so it was no trouble. No trouble. Oh, and
Yeah, I think I might have to
she hurried on.
I might have to do that for my
And little Bob,
for the next round of my thigh.
he had need of
Use some of that numbing cream.
came in. His tea was ready for him on the
I
hob,
feel
and they all tried who should help him to it.
I'm at the point
Then the two young
with as much work as I gotten done,
laid
my age,
against his face.
I think
They said,
I'm entitled to use numbing cream from time to time.
Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly
It's
to all the
'cause
family.
I've got tattoos done with back in the day with a homemade machine with a guitar string for your needle. Now those ones hurt. Just from getting tattoos done like that, and as many tattoos as I have. I think, and then as you get older, that shit hurts.
But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child, cried Bob. My little child. He broke down.
But I've used that numbing cream from time to time.
If he could have helped it, he and his child
It helps
would have
out
been
for the
further
most part.
apart, perhaps, than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself,
Right.
he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened, and went down.
I've used it for a couple of mine to where
They drew about the fire.
the only time I felt anything was
and mother working still.
at least on one of them it worked really, really good. But the only time I felt anything when I use it is when the numbing wears off.
And seeing that he looked a little,
But once the numbing wears off, that's then you start feeling it.
said Bob. He inquired what had happened to distress him. On which, said Bob, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard, I told him, I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know. Knew what, my dear? Why?
Yeah, when I was younger, most
Good wife.
it wasn't shit. I just sit there like
Everybody knows
nothing, and
that, said Peter.
nowadays
Very
I
well,
try to sit there like nothing
my boy, cried
while
Bob.
my
They do.
my face makes a different
Heartily
types of
sorry, he said, for your good wife. If I could be of
expressions.
service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that's where I live. Pray come to me. Now, it wasn't, cried Bob.
Yeah, 'cause now
anything
I'm,
he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind way.
I think 44, 45, something like that.
It really seemed as if he had
In my like mid 40s, so
and felt with us.
yeah, that shit hurts
I'm
now.
sure he's a good soul, said Mrs. Cratchit. You would be sure.
You know, sometimes on spots that
returned Bob, if you
didn't
saw
hurt
and
before.
spoke to him,
Like
I shouldn't be at all
when I got
surprised,
this one.
mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation. Only hear that, Peter, said Mrs. Cratchit. And then, cried
I
Peter,
used numbing cream for my that one. So I get it.
setting up for himself. Get along with you, retorted Peter, grinning. It's just as likely as not, said Bob. One of these days, though there's plenty of time.
And I still need
But however and whenever we
the editing
talk
site
to one
done.
another,
Which
then
I'm
she
definitely
will
gonna use
shall
numbing cream
none
for
of us
that.
forget Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this
Yeah,
first
but that one,
there was among us.
let me see if I can get a better view of it.
Father, cried they all. And I know, said Bob.
Now when I got
know,
that one,
my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was,
let's see, there
though
we
he
go.
was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. No, never, Father, they all cried again.
That one I used it, but
Very happy.
it worked for most of the
I am
tattoo,
very happy.
except for near the end. It was
Mrs.
starting to suck.
His daughters kissed him.
But
The two
the
young
reason-
Cratchits kissed
the only
him.
reason that
Peter
it
and himself
didn't
shook hands.
work for the entire
The lyric
tattoo
of Tiny Tim, my childish essence was
Was,
from
the person that was doing it,
Inspector, said Scrooge. Something informs me that our party
he took a while. He took a long time to actually get to it. So
Tell me what man that was whom we saw.
that took a lot
lying
into
there.
effect.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him, as before, though at a different time, he thought. Indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future, into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This court, said Scrooge, through which we hurry now.
Oh, yeah,
is
that
where
spot
my
sucks,
place of
dude.
occupation is.
And I still need, let's see, I still need to go from here
Let me
to
behold
there.
what I shall be
Yeah.
in days to come.
from
The
yeah, so
spirit
you-
stopped.
all
The
that
hand
still
was
to
pointed elsewhere.
get
The
done.
house is yonder.
Yeah, but that
Scrooge
spot,
exclaimed. Why do
yeah,
you
that spot
point
sucks.
away? The inexorable
I still
finger
need
underwent
that one. I just don't know what I'm gonna get right
Scrooge
there.
hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still.
I saved all the
furniture was not the same, and the figure in the
painful
chair
spots
himself.
for last.
The
But
phantom pointed.
now that I think back
He
on
pointed
it,
once again, and wondering why and whither he had gone,
I probably
it
should have.
until they reached an iron gate. He paused.
We got
to look
those out
up
of the way when I was younger, because it would have hurt, but it
Here
probably wouldn't be
the wretched man
as
who
bad
said
as it
he had
is
gone to learn lay underneath the
now.
ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape. Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, said Scrooge, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only? Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Man's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead, said Scrooge. But if the courses be departed from...
Oh yeah, that's the part that sucks is
say it is
when you think they're done with that spot, then they go right to that spot again later on when it's all nice and tender.
Crept towards it, trembling.
Yeah, that shit sucks. I know exactly how that feels.
Read upon the stone of the neglected grave is
already hurting in that spot, then you think you're done with it. And then they go right back to it.
Am I the man that lay upon the bed? He cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, spirit.
Because what was it? My ones on my
the finger still
my face were
Spirit, he cried, tightly.
We're done with no numbing cream.
I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been.
I got my face done with no numbing cream.
Why show me this if I am past all hope?
Yeah.
For the first time, the hand.
The side of my head could have gone all the way back here.
Spirit.
Then I got the top of my head.
On the ground, he fell before
then I got something on the side done.
Nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows around me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not
almost
shut out the lessons
I still have plenty of room.
Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
I got some done on my neck.
It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit
must want to get
repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. End of stave 4.
Hell yeah, Death Squad.
Stave 5 of A Christmas Carol. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Stave 5. The end of it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all,
Merry Christmas
the time
to you, bro.
before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the
I hope
past,
you have a
the
great day
present,
too,
and
brother.
the future, Scrooge repeated.
And definitely
as he
appreciate you
scrambled out of
stopping
bed.
by.
The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley,
Definitely hope
heaven and the Christmas
you and your
sky
family had a
give
good
praise for
Christmas.
this. I say it on my knees, oh Jacob, on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. "They are not torn down," cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. "They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will." His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance.
Hell yeah.
I
Right,
don't know
that's
what
all
to
that
do,"
matters.
cried Scrooge, laughing and crying.
I have to agree with you on that,
making a
Despot.
perfect lascoon of himself with his stockings. "I am light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello there. Ooh, hello." He had frisked into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. "There's the saucepan that the gruel was in," cried Scrooge, starting off again and going round the fire.
You have a good one
"There's
too,
the
brother.
door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. Oh, there's the window where I saw the wandering spirit. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened." Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh. The father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. "I don't know what day of the month it is," said Scrooge. "I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby." "Never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello. Ooh, hello there." He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer. Ding, dong, bell. Bell, dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold. Cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. "What's today?" cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. "Aye," returned the boy with all his might of wonder. "What's today, my fine fellow?" said Scrooge. "Today?" replied the boy. "Why, Christmas Day." "It's Christmas Day," said Scrooge to himself. "I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. Oh, they can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow." "Hello," returned the boy. "Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?" Scrooge inquired. "I should hope I did," replied the lad. "Ah, an intelligent boy," said Scrooge. "A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one." "What? The one as big as me?" returned the boy. "What a delightful boy," said Scrooge. "It is a pleasure to talk to him." "Yes, my buck. It's hanging there now," replied the boy. "Is it?" said Scrooge. "Go and buy it." "Walker!" exclaimed the boy. "No, no," said Scrooge. "I am in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell them to bring it here, that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand at a trigger who could have got a shot off half so fast. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's, whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be. The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. I shall love it as long as I live, cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand. I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has in its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello. How are you? Merry Christmas. It was a turkey. It never could have stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped them off short in a minute, like sticks of sealing wax. It's impossible to carry that to Camden Town, said Scrooge. You must have a cab. The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even when you don't dance while you're at it. But if he had cut the end of his nose off, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the street. The people were by this time pouring forth, as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir. A Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears. He had not gone far, when coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Barney's, I believe." It sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met. But he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace, and taking the old gentleman by both his hands, "how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir." "Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes," said Scrooge, "that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness—" Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me," cried the gentleman, as if his breath were taken away. "My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge, "not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?" "My dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, I don't know what to say to such munificent—" "Don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you come and see me?" "I will," cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. "Thank you," said Scrooge. "I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head, and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. But he made a dash and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. "Nice girl, very." "Yes, sir." "Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, along with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please." "Thank you. He knows me," said Scrooge, with his hand already on the dining room lock. "I'll go in here, my dear." He turned it gently and sidled his face in round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in great array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right. "Fred," said Scrooge, "dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started." Scrooge had forgotten, for the moment, about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account. "Why, bless my soul!" cried Fred. "Who's that?" "It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?" "Let him in? It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness." But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open, that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen, as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello," growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near as he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" "I am very sorry, sir," said Bob. "I am behind my time." "You are?" repeated Scrooge. "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please." "It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank. "It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir." "Now, I'll tell you what, my friend," said Scrooge. "I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore," he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again, "and therefore, I am going to raise your salary." Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him, and calling to the people in the court for help and a straight waistcoat. "A Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge, with an earnestness that could not be mistaken, as he clapped him on the back. "And a merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. And we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit." Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them. For he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins, as counterbality and less attractive folks. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterward. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that truly be said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. End of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
Fighting and dying swallowed his words. He ran toward her.
Hide, Leah! For the love of the light, hide!
After a minute, he managed to work up some spit. Was that what...
All right, everyone. Got a call into this live for tonight. But I want to thank Ev for stopping by, and everyone keeps stopping by. Definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.